Well, hi everyone. On behalf of 1990 Institute, I'm very excited to be here with this distinguished group of panelists to talk about unity through communication, specifically addressing how one can champion AAPI narrative through media and entertainment. But before we start, I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to the 1990 Institute and would love to show you a quick introduction video.
Introducing the 1990 Institute, a San Francisco-based 501c3 nonprofit that has been educating American teachers and youth for over 30 years. The 1990 Institute is an expert content creator and experienced program executor.
We make education relevant, interesting, and impactful through various digital platforms.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucia Liu.
And I'm Sia Meng.
We're the hosts of Fun to Brooklyn, a podcast sponsored by the 1990 Institute.
We are here because we have both lived in the US and China, and we are curious. Are Chinese and Americans, especially Asian Americans, living more interconnected lives or growing further apart?
Join us and our guests.
Sort of the business side of me thinking a little bit more.
I was born in Shanghai, and then I was raised in the States, went back to Shanghai.
And obviously everybody's a Yao Ming fan.
Bridge cultures between China and the US as we explore how Shanghainese, New Yorkers, and everyone in between are thinking about love, sports, music, health, identity, and much, much more. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Fun to Brooklyn, and listen to us on all major podcasting platforms.
Well, as you can see, 1990's Institute mission, it's really to bridge US and China relations. So I think with the latest podcast I'll be rolling out, there'll be a lot of interesting content coming your way. Now I would love to introduce the panelists. I'm trying to figure out who would want to start. Jeremy, can I nominate you to introduce yourself first?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Jeremy Tran. I'm the Executive Director of Gold House. We are a nonprofit collective of diverse leaders fighting for socioeconomic equality. Our programs focus on advancing the unity, representation, and success of the Asian and Pacific Islander communities.
Thank you, Jeremy. Elliot?
Hey, I'm Elliot Lum. I'm with the Association of National Advertisers. We are a client-side marketing and advertising trade association that represents over 1,000 members, $400 billion in advertising spend. I'm specifically with our Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing division, as well as our foundation, the ANA Educational Foundation.
Thanks, Elliot. Michelle?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Sugihara, the Executive Director of CAPE, which stands for the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. And we fight for AAPI representation in Hollywood, both in front of and behind the camera.
Thanks, Michelle. Last but not least, Jen.
Hi, everyone. I am a board member of the Asian American Journalists Association. We are a membership nonprofit advancing diversity in newsrooms and also ensure fair and accurate coverage of both AAPI community and in general, the community of color.
Thanks, Jen. I think what's so unique about this panel is that I think each of you brings a very unique perspective on this topic, and I hope our audience can get really different point of views from you, as well as tangible actions that they can embark upon afterwards. As we've heard from the previous, previous session, I think there's this continuing rhetoric of anti-Asian violence and all of the current events that are happening. But at the same time, we've also seen progress in the past year with increased focus in the political scene to entertainment and athletic success led by the AAPI community. I'm just going to start with the most kind of popular topic at hand, which is Shang-Chi, the Marvel superhero movie with the first Asian American superhero, and which I believe for 3 weeks in a row has now remained at #1 in the box office. In fact, I think yesterday they just said it surpassed Black Widow's record. So I thought it was, but what was interesting, I don't know whether any of you have heard, before the movie came out, I think there were a lot of MCU fans that were concerned about the lack of exposure of the film. But in any case, I want to turn this to Jeremy and Michelle, because I wanted to start with you, because I totally understand there have been a lot of efforts done behind the scenes in terms of what to do, how Gold House and CAPE would support, and rally to launch a film like this. Would love to hear from your perspective on what actions you've taken, reasons behind you've taken it, and what have you learned throughout the process. So, yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to start. And then Michelle, feel free to jump in, correct me when I misspeak. Thanks for that question, Rebecca. I'm first of all so excited that the film is doing so well. I think it's important for not only the Asian American communities, but for other communities to come and support this film, right? And to see the diverse, the complex, the fun, the dynamic representation of people that look like us on the big screen. In terms of our efforts at Gold House and in CAPE, and through our joint efforts through a movement we call Gold Open, we've been working with Marvel and Shang-Chi for several months now. First, just making sure that the film will resonate well not only with our community, but other communities. And then secondly, in terms of pushing it out and encouraging people to come watch the film, we hosted a slate of different events. We brought in different community leaders, different change makers and people who can really support the film early on, to see it, to rally behind it, to encourage everyone they know to go watch it. And then what was really, really successful and really moving was being able to raise money to buy out theaters, to donate them to different community groups, to donate them to different children's nonprofit groups across the country. And this really started with the Shang-Chi Challenge, which started out of San Gabriel Valley from Ron Han. And he raised, I think, over $20,000 for the Boys and Girls Club in San Gabriel Valley. And then we worked directly with GoFundMe to help launch and coordinate a lot of other campaigns across the country, from Chicago to Boston to LA to San Francisco. So overall, we raised, I think, over $40,000 to $50,000 to help buy out theaters. And we're still in the process of donating them to different nonprofit groups across the country.
And I think what I would just also add to that is that Gold Open started several years ago. So this is really the continuation of, it's really to get the word out and to educate and train our community, quite frankly, the importance of opening weekend box office numbers. So it's really not just about, I'll wait till it comes onto a streamer, or I'll see it when it's not as crowded. Although I understand we are in an interesting situation now with COVID, and completely understand people's comfort level about going back to the theaters. But just historically, this movement of the Gold Open movement is to really inspire people to support these films that support AAPI cast, both in front and behind the camera. So what I actually love about Shang-Chi as well is the writer and the director was also AAPI. So it's not just about what we're actually seeing on the screen.
That is correct. It's a holistic collaboration. Jin, I want to turn to you from a journalistic point of view, because what we've seen is there's also been a lot of coverage alongside the movie launch as well. So wanted to hear from your perspective. Was there any interesting facts or anecdotes that you find the coverage of the film to be interesting?
Yeah, definitely. I think, in the past few years, we definitely have seen, from Crazy Rich Asian to Shang-Chi, there's a movement in media to cover entertainment and art from the community, that really using the writers and the photographers that are from the community to tell the stories. And I think in this, time when we cover Shang-Chi from a journalist perspective, we've seen tremendous reporting, tremendous photos, on the magazine covers. At the same time, just film reviews from our community to connect not only the film itself, but connecting that with our culture, community culture, with Asian Americans and also back in Asia. So that kind of, global movement within media industry to really cover the our culture and cover the a film like Shang-Chi from its root and from its background, really tell our story, take that narrative, is really encouraging that we're seeing this year.
Definitely, there's definitely been an increase. All the articles, coverage, and op-ed that were written has been so amazing. Elliot, I wanted to hear from you from a marketing perspective, because with this particular film, there's been brand partnerships ranging from, I think that was like an Xbox, a limited edition Xbox, to like Sanzo, which is like an Asian themed kind of sparkling water brand. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective. How is it pushing a very Asian American centric film? Has been in the advertising or marketing space?
Yeah, just thanks, Rebecca. You, as a marketer yourself, you know that you use a lot of data to evaluate decisions. And so historically, when you look at marketing spend is typically allocated to, let's call it general market, Black, Hispanic, but there's typically very little to none of an investment in the Asian American segment for a variety of different kinds of reasons that I can go into later on. But I think what this did in terms of partnerships was, when I was doing partnerships, when I was at Columbia Records, putting brands and artists together, a brand is always evaluating what's the demographic, what's the market size, what's the fit. And so I think what was great about these kinds of partnerships, and hopefully those in the future, is that you can actually start to see that this is a segment to be seen, that's visible, the economic power is there, and that it's a good ROI, right? From a pure commercial perspective. So I think it certainly started to catalyze that conversation, in addition to like some of the brands that already invest in the Asian American market.
Yeah, that we can definitely see that trend going upwards, which is very encouraging. And even though, everyone's talking about Shang-Chi movie because it's central in everyone's conversation and everyone's orbit right now, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And I wanted to divert the attention to the Gina Davis Institute report that I think both CAPE and Gold House have collaborated with assembling together, understanding that there is now a profusion of Asian actors starting to get more visibility in popular entertainment. Love to hear a Cliff's Notes version, or like your kind of your version of what did the report really convey to the wider audience, and what must anybody in the audience take away? So I'm gonna give it back to Michelle and Jeremy too. Either you both can answer.
I can jump in first. I know it's always the Zoom etiquette, right? And it's funny how to figure that out. We were really honored to work with Gina Davis Institute and CAPE on this study, and it really adds to the literature out there already. There was a study by USC as well that came out earlier this year on film representation for the API community. On a high level, I think Michelle can speak to the survey that CAPE conducted that really added color to the hard analysis of different films over the last several years, that really gave anecdotes and made it more digestible, I'd say, than just hard numbers. But Rebecca, to get to your question, it's yes, things are looking better. They've looked better in the last 2-3 years, but if you look at the span of 10 years, highest grossing films, films with the biggest budgets, we are still poorly underrepresented, and not just underrepresented in terms of number of films, number of roles, but also really the quality of representation, right? There are still persistent stereotypes that we see throughout a lot of these films. the hypersexualization of API women, the emasculation of API men, the perpetual foreigner, forever foreigner stereotypes, and the list goes on and on. So I'll stop there, and then I'm happy to dive in a little more about kind of some of the key takeaways and areas where we think, as community members, as people who consume media generally, what we all can do to try to improve the situation.
Thank you for that. I always make Jeremy go first. Thank you for jumping in there. And I would just echo really Jeremy's thoughts there, that for Gold House and CAPE both to be able to partner with a great organization like the Gina Davis Institute was just really a great collaboration for all of us. And so it was really a two-part component where CAPE did a survey of our members, basically about their experience in the industry, people who are working both behind and in front of the camera, as well as the hard number study that you see. And really, some of the things for me that popped out were that, yes, there is progress, but there is still a long way to go. One of the survey questions was, on a scale of like 1 to 5, I'm typically the only Asian American in the room. And that was a very, very high percentage that came back. So we're still seeing that there could be a lot more representation, especially of AAPIs in front of and behind the camera. And then just also from a story perspective, one of the findings was that Asian women are sexualized more than in any other community. And we know that the images that we watch in our screens affect the way we think, feel, and act in the real world. So when we talk about the violence against Asians in the real world, a lot of it is because of these images and perceptions that we're just constantly fed through the media, which is why the media is so important in shifting culture and changing perceptions.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, and there's still a lot to go. Elliot, I wanted to bring up, I think you shared at ANA, you just did My Voice Matter report, where it talks about, linking inclusion to business growth and how, showing more. I think this is unexpected, but I feel like a lot of these underlying theme is really having rich, reliable data to inform us on, what next steps, we should do. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective with what the ANA has done. Are there any specific observations or takeaways that you wanted to share?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for giving me that opportunity to talk a little bit about ANA initiatives. And I think one of the key divisions that we have is the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, which has about 150 members, which is about 10% of the size of the ANA, but very focused on multicultural marketing and diversity and inclusion. So they will do things like playbooks, like the Stop Asian Hate playbook that they developed for the marketing and advertising industry. There's a big effort to measure cultural relevance in ads. So right now, the measurement system doesn't take into account like culture as a key indicator of whether or not that particular ad will actually resonate with its core audience. Or there's an effort to be able to clean up data quality when it comes to attaching a person with a race and ethnicity in some of the biggest data houses in the world, like Axiom and Epsilon, and making sure that the data actually has integrity, which unfortunately for Black, Hispanic, and Asian American, they don't necessarily tag directly to that kind of data. So it can get a little technical, but like the quality, as you know, is like garbage in, garbage out. And so the main theme here from an ANA perspective is that we very much focus on all segments. We have a platform called See All, and then we try to sort of hyper focus on, for instance, Stop Asian Hate when something like that happens, or Black Lives Matter when that happens, because there is this idea of a unified effort. I love the idea of unified effort within AAPI, but there's also a unified effort across disenfranchised voices that collectively we can, make change against systemic racism.
Thanks for that. And I would also say the political scene, also in journalism and also with a current president's AAPI policies and statements, that has definitely helped influence, the current narrative in the industry. So Jin, I know when we chatted yesterday, we had a good laugh about like BTS being at the UN. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective as a journalist. Tell us more about like what progress or challenges you've seen in the front lines of newsrooms and media coverage.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, in the past 2 years, we have seen a lot of AAPI newsroom leaders rose to the top level executive positions. Giving you a few examples, that we have Swell Chen at Texas Tribune, we have Sarah Gu at Axios, we have Swati Sharma at Vox, and we have Versha Sharma at Teen Vogue. We have, I work, my day job, I work for the Associated Press. Our new CEO is Sri Lankan British Daisy Veerasingham. And at the same time, Reuters, also another very big global wire services, now is led by Gina Chua, a Singaporean journalist. And also one of the, I think she is the highest positioned transgender journalist in the world. So those are really, really, exciting and exciting movement that we're having right now in the industry with AAPIs. AJ also passed over 2,000 members in the past few months. As the first time after 2008, after the financial crisis, a lot of journalists of color actually left the industry. So we are seeing this, coming back movement. At the same time, we have more and more APIs rising to the top leadership levels. But I think, at the same time, we also face significant challenges. Like earlier this year in March, we faced, covering the Atlanta shooting, which is a horrific event for our API community. At the same time, a lot of our journalists have voiced, frustrations of how they wanted to go to the front line and to report on those issues in our community, but face, newsrooms are dismissing their opinion, or they have to, fight really hard, being the only AAPI in that newsroom, to even openly talk about their frustrations. I think we are facing, multi-dimensional challenges, at the same time seeing some progress. We have more and more API younger journalists that want to come into the industry. At the same time, we have this challenge of holding the line with, mid-career journalists, and also advancing the journalists who are senior, who have a lot of experiences. So, I mean, journalism industry is declining in general, right? At the same time, we are seeing, more and more people choosing to freelance and choose to go to other part of the media industry. How do we, collaborate with everybody as storytellers in entertainment, in the bigger global media, and also at the same time knowing that, without our journalists working very hard to represent our community every single day in journalism, we're missing a lot of stories, a lot of narratives of our community.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a lot of opportunities to develop the younger generation of journalists. And speaking of journalism, I wanted to bring up the most recent Olympics, where there's surprisingly that there's Sumi Lee, who's the Asian American gymnast that have won gold, and also athletes like Jeremy Lin has speaking against anti-Asian hate. Jeremy, I know Gold House also works with a lot of athletes like Nathan Chen and the Shibutani twins. How do you foresee the role of sports or sports culture itself can help amplify our narrative?
The wonderful thing I think about sports is that if you're good, if you're the best at your sport, you're the best at your sport, right? It doesn't matter kind of what you look like, where you came from. So it's really I mean, there are obvious reasons on how you can get to becoming the best, but if you're like the best, like Suni, you just, you automatically get this platform where you can kind of tell others, show others that, hey, it doesn't matter what you look like, you can be the best at this sport. Sports is just another form of media. It's another form of entertainment, right? So once we have those athletes that are really at the pinnacle of their career and the pinnacle of their of the sport they play in, what we can do is rally behind them, give them the spotlight, make sure that they have the opportunity to share their stories, where they come from, how they got to where they are in achieving these amazing things, just to inspire others. It really is just another story.
That makes sense. And it also reminded me of athletes like Naomi Osaka, who has now, big, huge endorsement from, the likes of Nike and Sweet Green. I'm just curious, Elliot, kind of going back to that brand endorsement and that partnership angle. I'm curious to hear whether you have any observations on that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I think to Jeremy's point, there's a stage there that naturally creates attention, which brands obviously want to activate against. And so the greater opportunities that athletes have to get to this kind of stage. I mean, you look at the US Open and the finals, it was a all Asian final, right? So I think it's great to acknowledge that and to amplify those kinds of messages so that that awareness seeps into, candidly, from a marketing and advertising perspective, budgets that want to invest in these kinds of athletes that represent Asian culture, but also transcend to American kind of overall culture that is one and the same.
Yeah. Makes sense. And I think what's apparent with all these current events that are unfolding is that there is this kind of generational differences in terms of how Gen Z talks about AAPI community, or how the older, slightly older generation talks about the AAPI community. So with Asian popular culture and K-pop and more and more representation of the AAPI community on TV and movies, I think many of us have long enjoyed it, but I think now, the US is really trying to adopt it gradually. So Michelle, I'm curious to hear, because you focus on this on a day-to-day basis, how with this emergence of like the younger generation being more receptive to diverse culture, and also yet trying to figure out how to continue to support the older generation. I'm curious whether from Kate's perspective, whether there's any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really seeing, it is really the younger generation that's embracing, and not just embracing, but pushing forward this culture of acceptance of diverse stories. And even as the population itself gets more and more diverse with each passing year, I just have so much hope for the future in that sense. And I just saw a study the other day. It was by Variety, and basically they surveyed the watching habits. Like, what are the platforms that all of the different generations are watching? And as of at least a snapshot in time right now, Netflix was basically at the top of all of them across the board. And so, which is a really interesting finding, because I mean, we all know now Netflix is global and it just reaches such a big audience, and their library just continues to grow. So that's something that we're also just watching, and also just where are the younger generation watching their content as everything moves away from, everyone's cutting cable and it's moving to our cell phones or our smaller screens. And so just very curious to see what's going to happen in the future.
And
sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to add on.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add on my excitement of what Michelle was saying. I think part of it is exactly what she alluded to, is that, there's almost a taking the media back into the people's hands, right? There's this digital creators, right? People people who are like, 10 to 15 are like on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. Like they're not necessarily sitting down and watching cable TV anymore. So it's really interesting to see those who have a computer that you can start putting out content, and then you can become one of the most watched YouTube channels, right? And people are rallying behind those from all different backgrounds and those from all different stories using those platforms. So it's really exciting to see how that is changing and how the power is going back to the people in that sense, and those who aren't just like at the highest levels at different studios making decisions, but now we can kind of vote ourselves by watching, clicking and watching something on these digital platforms.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think while there's this burgeoning rise of Gen Z and digital content consumption, I can't help but remember all the kind of community events that we still do in like Chinatowns in San Francisco and LA, where people that are less tech savvy may not be on social media. So Jin, I know we had a conversation about there's still different languages are still used versus different generations, and I'm just curious to hear from you. Are there ways to bridge those communication gaps while we have this really enthusiastic younger generation that are really being vocal, but yet how do we simultaneously support the older generation in all of our advocacy work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in journalism, we have seen in the past like 18 months that we faced the significant challenges of like battling misinformation in this pandemic, and along with an election. And right now we're still battling misinformation about vaccine rollout. It's significant for AAPI community because we all come from different background. It's very diverse, and people speak different kind of languages. They use different kind of platforms. They read different kind of media. They use different ways to consume news information. And I would say mass media, majority of us, working English media, that our content might not end up to, explain why you need to get vaccinated, why, you need to mask up, or, like explain your local politics as well as those, ethnic media that are, newspapers you pick up from your, from Eshmar, right? Like, or, WeChat information that we completely have no way to fact check or battle with. So, social media platforms are great in reaching a lot of different generations, but also remind ourselves that even, places like Facebook maybe right now have an older generation demographic compared to TikTok. Still, there are significant challenges to fact check those informations in different languages at the same time, making sure that our community is served with the accurate information. So in journalism, I think there should be a movement, and we yet have not figured out the solution, which is how can we engage with diverse community like AAPI that we speak different languages, not like Hispanic or Latino community that you can probably fact check us in Spanish, that you can reach majority of them. But for us, it's really difficult that with all those languages and making sure that everything can be, fact checked at the same time. Often we see misinformation happening in English and in other languages parallel with each other, but you immediately see the English misinformation will be fact checked by, Washington Post and New York Times or CNN, or different kind of MSNBC are trying to roll out those accurate information to reach audience. At the same time, it can still happen in Chinese 6 months later, exactly the same information spreading on WeChat, and we have no way to control that. So I think, there is, we need to figure out a way to reach our community, and we need to figure out a way to give ethnic media a better platform, bigger platform, and allow them to do their work and support them. And also, they should be, empowered, and at the same time, be paid for what they're doing. And I know majority of them are struggling. And at the end of the day, I would like my mom can receive accurate language in her language and on her channel of the information that she should be reading.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not something that can be achieved overnight, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So I think throughout this conversation, it's really clear that there are a lot of promising steps that are happening in this space. I apologize for the fire truck. And at the same time, still a lot of room for growth. I'm gonna kind of pivot it to more of a optimistic view. I want to hear from each of you, what are the things that you're looking forward to, given that the pandemic somehow has spearheaded a lot of these movement, but also have uncovered a lot of kind of gaps that we need to fill. So Michelle, I wanted to hear from you, like from an entertainment perspective, what do you look forward to in terms of having more media representation? Is it having more data analysis? I would just love to hear what do you think about the future?
It's a big question, actually, because I really do think it is all of those things. It is data analysis. It is more representation at the executive levels. It is more representation on the creative side. And really, it's also about the industry essentially stepping up, because right now there's a whole thing with AAUC, which is a union for below the line and animation, right? They're not getting paid a living wage. And so really to see how the industry can change from within. And there's also the hashtag of Pay Up Hollywood, where assistants are also not getting paid a living wage and having to work with these really, really horrendous hours. So hopefully the industry will become a better place to work. We hear a lot about things that go on behind the scenes, and both privately and as well as publicly. We all saw it, Harvey Weinstein, and like just that coming to light, and really having more API diverse female and non-binary people rising up through the ranks. Like for me, that's something that we're really excited about, or cautiously optimistic, maybe I'd say. I don't know, that change sometimes is slower than we want, but hoping that the industry really will rise to the occasion. And I really do think that the streamers and social media have really accelerated the change.
Definitely. Jeremy, what about you? What are your observations?
Yeah, I think Michelle said it great. I think a few things come to mind. First, I'm really excited that we are having these conversations, right? That people are now aware of the issues, and change is slow, but at least there's progress in that they're listening and they want to learn more from us. So very, very specifically, I think I'm excited to see more disaggregated data, not just this is the API representation, but really diving deep into the different ethnicities, the different experiences of different groups within the API community. I'm looking forward to putting money where their mouth is, like more investments, what Elliot was saying, more investments into the marketing campaigns that are targeted not only to our community, but to the broader general population, but for our films, for our stories. And then finally, allyship. I think it's really exciting to see that there are a lot of different communities, multicultural communities, as well as, the majority, wanting to help each other, wanting to learn from each other and really support and lift each other up.
Sounds great. Elliot, what are your thoughts on things looking forward to?
Yeah, Rebecca, I mean, as a part of this marketing group that we started, it's been since the pandemic, we've created this marketing network of AAPI marketing executives. So there's about 180 of them right now, and it's representative of East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, which was really crucial. And I think for me, I think the insight has been like, for the first time, people are talking and conflating race and their profession together. That hasn't happened before, where it's like, hey, I'm a marketer, heads down, I focus to get to the top, I lift up, and then I'm like, how do I get back? Do I have peers? And like what the network has done has been able to calibrate that you don't have to go at it alone. And I think that there's something powerful. And I always joke, like before the pandemic, if I said, hey, I invite 100 marketers who are AAPI to a session, like maybe 5 people would have come. And now like there is a greater awakening of that where people are like, yeah, like I want to see somebody that looks like myself and I want to help that person grow, right? So we have some examples of CMOs, chief marketing officers reaching back and saying directors getting to the VP level and like helping out. And so I think that kind of like muscle is really important to build, because I don't think that's a very common sort of element in our professional development, maybe like within your close circle, or maybe if you're, certain, like if you're Chinese or Japanese or whatever, but how do you sort of support one another because we're part of this larger fabric in America? And I think that to me sort of creates optimism, because it kind of creates connectivity, creates the ability to feel like you can drive action together. And I think that for me is probably the most heartwarming, that people are willing to lean in, whereas I don't necessarily believe that was the case before.
Yeah, very apparent. Jin, I know that AAJA is doing a lot of actions and projects in the work, so I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, I think in the past year, the thing I'm personally most look forward to is people outside of AAPI, that they are starting to learn how diverse AAPI this community is. I think right now AAJA is leading a lot of style guide changes in newsrooms, that we're pushing that. We are making sure when we say AAPI, different perspectives within AAPI is included. Like when we say Asian American, that doesn't mean it includes Pacific Islanders. And when we say AAPI, it actually, you have to include the PI perspective in this as well. I think there are a lot of nuances in telling those stories, and we need to keep moving forward with those changes and making sure media industry in general is accurately reflecting what our community is. And I think a few things we're doing. We are going to start a media institute at the local level, which is training AAPI community and community organizers how to present yourself and your organization, as well as your movement on with media, because it is difficult, right? Like not everybody is camera ready. Not everybody would feel comfortable when you receive a call from a major network saying you have to be on air in two hours. They're gonna be like, okay, I know what I'm gonna say. So we want to train our community to be media ready and to have that power saved within the community, knowing that when I get a journalist call, I'm not going to panic. I'm going to represent my community. I will feel proud of getting on camera and to say what I've been doing, and letting everyone know to support my movement. In addition to that, we're also pushing a program called AAJ Studio, and we finished the phase 1 and we're working on the phase 2, which is store the AAPI experts dictionary almost with AAJA. So when media are looking for AAPI expert on any issues, not only on the AAPI issues, it can be anything, including history, including environment, including diversity, inclusion, that they can go to a place and find those people. So there is no excuse for any media come to us saying, oh, we did not include AAPI perspective on this program because we can't find anyone. That is not acceptable. We have those people there, and we want to grow that database to making sure that when they urgently need someone. We understand the broadcast journalism often happen, very quickly, and they need to find someone on air right away. They have a list of names to call, and making sure that database is diverse within the API community and with gender diversity, with everything that we're considering. We at the end of the day, we all want our community to be represented better.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very exciting and a much needed initiative to push towards our local communities. So definitely excited to see how that unfolds. I have a last question for all of you. We're amongst an audience of nonprofit organizations, activists, people that are really interested in supporting everything that you've discussed today. What takeaways or recommendations you would recommend our audience to take action upon, whether it is support the movie or doing very tangible things, or any ideas you might have. So Elliot, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So I just say, I mean, to the community, I think it's continue to do what you're doing. Honestly, I think what you're doing is incredible work, and that you should be proud of the work that you're doing. I think there in the nonprofit world, what I have seen is this Hunger Games mentality, where people are kind of like focused on the one thing that they are focused on and don't necessarily have blinders on to everything else. And I think with what Jeremy and Michelle have struck, which is a great partnership, and I think what this marketing community wants to strike with other kinds of communities, it's like, how do we go at it together? And I think it's never easy. The lines are never very clear sometimes, but putting yourself out there to do outreach, to find, you look at some organization like Stop AAPI Hate, that actually was a joint collaboration with 3 entities, 1 a professor, and then 2 nonprofits. And so the more that we build that muscle to collaborate together, the better.
Love that. Love that. Jeremy, any takeaways?
Elliot, you said it perfectly. That's exactly what I wanted to say as well. I think it's important that we talk to and work to and learn from people who are different from us, not just those from other communities, but even within our own community, right? Unity doesn't mean that we all think the same, right? We're just here to learn from each other, support each other, but there will be differences of opinions, and there will be different things that we focus on. So I think more than anything, being able to reach out to other nonprofit groups, other activists, those from other communities as well, to learn from them, to work with them, will help our overall community advance much quicker.
Thanks for that. Michelle?
+1 to everything that both Elliot and Jeremy said, because we're all stronger together. One thing that I might suggest for nonprofits, especially issue-based nonprofits, is to consider just the power of media and incorporating that within what you do. We consult a lot on scripts, and also there's a growing community of nonprofits like us that insert or weave basically our issue-based topics into the shows that we watch on television. So I'm going to guess at this point, everybody knows what a designated driver is. And, 30 years ago, nobody knew what that was. And it was really the Harvard Alcohol Project that brought that over from Scandinavia. And instead of going to the legislature, they went to Hollywood, and they seeded that narrative into popular shows like Cheers and LA Law. And so over time, it became this thing that now everybody knows. And so it's, groups like Define American, GLAAD, RAIN, Color of Change, Harness. And so it's like there's a lot of us actually. And so just considering that and thinking about that, I've been talking to some PI groups about that as well, because we talk to a lot of these networks who want to do a Pacific Islander script or show, and they don't have any PIs on the team. And so I say, you really need to be connected with some of these nonprofits who know their community and are doing the work on the ground. So something I would just offer.
Yeah, great advice. Jen, any takeaways?
I agree with everything you said already, of course. In addition, I would really encourage everyone to engage and support AAPI journalists because they are fighting every single day and very hard in their newsrooms to talk about our stories. Like check the byline when you read a story and share them, and if you really love what they do, tell them you love what they do. Because, a lot of the time we're really frustrated. We can be, wrapped into this news cycle and feel like so tired. And I mean, pandemic for journalists is just a never ending game. They need that kind of encouragement. They need that kind of, just a kudos as I really love this reporting and I encourage other people reading it. It's the best way that you can show appreciation of what they do, at the same time letting them know, we're reading, our community is reading, and keep doing what you're doing.
That's great. I know we're almost at time, but I have one quick fire question that I hope either Michelle or Jeremy can answer. With the blockbuster success of Shang-Chi, have you already heard about conversations in Hollywood about more AAPI projects?
I mean, I wouldn't even necessarily peg it just to Shang-Chi. And so I mentioned earlier that we consult on a lot of projects. And what I'm really excited about is there are so many in the pipeline and they're in development. And it's been happening for a long time. And I know everyone also talks about Go Back from Crazy Rich Asians, that also greenlit a lot of projects. But Always Be My Maybe and those shows had also been greenlit even before Crazy Rich Asians. So I think there's this misperception of oh, it takes this one thing and then everything happens from that. It has been happening for a while, and unfortunately sometimes things get stuck in what's called development hell and it never really makes it to the screen. And so that's something that is just part of the business, but I am encouraged to see so many storylines in development.
That's great. Now, this was a question from the audience. So I think genuinely, I think everyone was just excited to see what's more to come. I think we're at time, and really just wanted to thank you all panelists for devoting your Saturday to talk about this very important topic. And yeah, very, very thankful for your attendance here. So thank you.
Great job moderating, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you for doing it. I know that's been a lot with what you're doing, so appreciate you pulling everyone together.
Anything to spread the message, right? So, all right. Thank you, everyone.